Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we have a great game that was played in the first Title Tuesday of the year between none other than two world champions, or should I say two former world champions. Now we have Vladimir Kramnik, who's been very loud about chess.com. He's been talking about accusations of cheating. He said he will never play again on chess.com. And on the other side, we have Magnus Carlsen, who needs no introduction, having recently won the World Rapid Championship as well as the World Blitz Championship. So without further ado, let's jump right into the action. So we have this game being played in round number 9 between Vladimir Kramnik and Magnus Carlsen. Kramnik with the white pieces. Now the game starts with the move e4. Now one thing that you guys will notice here is that Kramnik's time after this first move is down to 1 minute and 40 seconds. So what that means is that Kramnik showed up late to the game. He was clearly AFK, or away from the keyboard, as we like to say in young kids jargon, but he shows up and plays e4. So after e4, Magnus plays this move h6. Now Magnus showing a tremendous amount of respect. On the one hand, he uses a minute and 20 seconds before playing his first move, but then on the other hand, he shows an insane amount of disrespect by playing this move h6. So we have e4 h6. Kramnik plays d4. Now Kramnik, being a former world champion, having beaten one of the greatest players of all time, Garry Kasparov, you expect him to crush Magnus, but will he, is the question. So we get d4 being played by Kramnik with e6 from Magnus. We now get the move knight c3, and now a6 played here. Now a6 is perhaps a little bit dubious. I think the black should play the move d5 here, and in fact, after this move knight f3 and knight f6, for example, we have transposed back into a pretty normal French defense. So Magnus goes a6 here. After a6, we get this move knight to f3, and now Magnus plays the move b5, trying to fianchetto the bishop to b7 and pressure the pawn on e4. So after b5, we get the move bishop to d3 being played, and now Magnus plays c5. Here Kramnik decides to take on c5, and already there are some shades of another game that was played a few months back in the Speed Chess Championship between Fabiano Caruana with the white pieces and Hikaru Nakamura with the black pieces. Now in that match, Hikaru was showing a tremendous amount of disrespect. He was usually playing something like e4 a6 on move 1, and there was a game that was quite similar to this one, where after d4 e6 knight f3 b5, I believe after bishop d3, Hikaru played c5 with a similar structure. So not such a different position after all. So at any rate, we have this position after c5. Kramnik takes on c5. Magnus takes back with the bishop. Kramnik decides to castle here, and now we have the move bishop b7 being played. Now one of the things here is that the computer gives white a very big advantage after this move e5 here, trying to take space in the center, stops black from developing with the knight, and white intends to go either bishop e4 or knight to e4 and put pressure in the center of the board. Now I see someone in chat asked a question, so I will respond to this. They said, what happened in that game? Now in that game, I believe that Hikaru did win, if I'm not mistaken, and Hikaru did win that Speed Chess Championship match quite handily. Now, as I was saying about the specific position after this move a4 is played, one of the issues with playing blitz games is you don't have a lot of time to think. I think if Kramnik had 10, 15, 20 minutes to think here, there's a good chance that he would have played this move e5. But in blitz game, you have to play on instinct reaction. With Kramnik having shown up late to the game and losing a lot of time at the start, it's pure intuition. So he plays this move a4. And now after b4, Kramnik has completely thrown away the advantage. In fact, he's actually worse here as the computer gives black a slight advantage. So you go from 0.7 on move 1 to better for black on move 8, and I frankly find that quite interesting. And what that speaks to more than anything else is the fact that Kramnik here is playing against Magnus Carlsen, and there's a massive psychological impact in terms of who he's playing. If Kramnik were playing someone a little bit weaker, I don't think we would see this effect. I think Kramnik would probably find better moves, but at the end of the day, it's not all about the moves. There are other factors which influence the results in general. So we have the move knight to e2 being played here by Kramnik. Now Magnus develops his knight, and we start to see why this move e5 was so effective, because now Magnus just simply intends to castle his king out of the center of the board. So we get knight to g3 played here. We now have the move d6 being played by Magnus, queen e2 from Kramnik. We get the move knight bd7, and now this move a5 is played here. Now after a5, queen c7 is played. We get bishop d2. Magnus now plays h5. Now h5, probably not the best move in the position. Computer actually wants black to maybe castle either way. Although what's amazing here is after a bit of a think, I noticed that the weak stockfish engine, now it says h5 is the best move, which I find very interesting. So we have h5 being played here by Magnus. Now we get bishop to g5 from Kramnik, and Magnus goes knight to e5. Now what Magnus is trying to do here is he's trying to attack on the king side. His king is still flexible. You can castle either to the queen side or to the king side, and both of these two bishops are on great diagonals targeting the white pawns and the white king as well. After knight to e5, Kramnik trades the knights on e5. Now, on first glance, you're like, ew, black has double pawns on e5 and e6. This is terrible. But the pawn on e6 actually stops white from being able to put the knight on f5 or put a knight on d5 here. So in fact, the double pawns here cover some critical squares. Kramnik takes on f6, we get g takes f6, and now Kramnik goes for the hero play with this move knight takes h5. Now, one of the reasons I call this a hero play is because Kramnik is getting very greedy here. He's playing like a computer. He's grabbing a pawn on the edge of the board. He's given Magnus the 2 Bs here on these great diagonals. Black can move the king, try to attack on the king side, and it just optically looks very scary. So after knight takes h5, what does Magnus do? Magnus thinks he's Hikaru, so of course he plays king e7 with a classic bomb cloud, bringing the king into the center of the board and into the heart of the action. After king to e7, Kramnik plays knight to g3, and now Magnus goes rook h4, trying to create the classic Wendy's double stack on the h file with rook h8 and putting massive pressure towards the pawn on h2. Additionally, you'll notice that this bishop on c5 is always spying the pawn on the king, and it can never be removed. So it's like if you were playing COD, for example, you're literally sitting in that one position waiting for someone to run in, and you're just sitting there waiting for it to happen, and then you're going to get the headshot, you're going to kill them, and life is great. So after rook to h4, Kramnik plays h3. Now we get rook to g8 being played, and now you start to see some serious problems. Kramnik goes king to h2, and now we have this move f5, which is an awesome move by Magnus, trying to rip open both of these great diagonals towards the white king and both these pawns. You have the rooks on these great open g and h files, and it's very, very hard to play. So here Kramnik plays the move bishop takes a6, which isn't the best move, but it's really hard to fault him here because the computer wants takes and e4 and then bishop a6. But just looking at this position optically, black has a double wooden shield in the middle of the board here. It's really, really hard to play for white. These rooks are very, very strong. Both these bishops are great on c5 and d5, and whenever you have a double wooden shield, it's just too OP. So instead, we get bishop takes a6 from Kramnik, and now we have the move bishop takes e4 being played, and now Kramnik plays knight takes bishop. Now, Kramnik probably during the game was thinking, wait, I get rid of this bishop on e4. Now with no b, there are no threats on this long light square diagonal, and the rook on g8 can't be super active, so surely I should be okay. However, white is not okay. After rook takes e4, Kramnik plays this move queen to h5, and now Magnus plays rook to d4. Now, this is not the best move. Keep in mind, the players are kind of getting low on time. Computer says after rook to f4, pressuring the pawn on f2. If white plays f3, now black can play e4, opening up this great diagonal scope for the queen on c7, and white is close to loss after king h1 and queen e5, because black will line up the classic double A battery with bishop to d6, one sample line, let's say bishop b5, bishop d6, you play a6, and now after rook takes f3, you're threatening the mate. I guess here there's queen h4, which might save, but I think you guys get the point of what I'm saying. Maybe rook g4 is actually simpler here, and now there's a checkmate on h2. So Magnus instead plays rook to d4 here. Another idea I think that he has here is to go rook d2, creating the classic kebab on the second rank with the rook, and if white tries to play something like rook d1, you can maybe trade and win the pawn on f2. So after rook to d4, we have king h1 being played by Kramnik. Not a very good move, as you guys can see from the evaluation bar. And now we have the move queen to c6, which creates a classic double attack. You attack the bishop on c6, but you also hit the pawn on g2 and threaten checkmate in uno. So after queen to c6, Kramnik plays queen to f3, and now Magnus shows no mercy here. He plays queen takes a6. Now, Magnus probably could even trade the queens here and play something like rook h4, and this is also winning after, say, king h2 and e4, with ideas like bishop to d6 and the classic ladder checkmate on the king side. But Magnus would rather simply take a free piece. So Magnus plays queen takes a6, and now Kramnik decides to play c3. Now, normally you would expect a former world chess champion playing against the greatest player of all time to simply resign, but Kramnik's having none of it, and he plays the move c3. After c3, we get the move b takes c3. Queen takes c3 being played here by Kramnik, and now Magnus goes bishop b4. Now you're noticing here that Magnus is simply trying to consolidate his position. He's not looking for like a win in 3 or 4 moves. He just knows that if he doesn't blunder right away and his king is very safe with this nice wall of pawns, or the linebacker pawns as I would call them, he should be fine. So we get queen to c7 check. Magnus goes king f6, and this is what I would call the linebacker formation of pawns. I think I've spoken about it before, but there's certain situations where you get a pawn in front of a set of pawns, and I like to use football analogies, and I sometimes call it the it's like, you know, the screen of pawns, because it's like the screen where you have the linebackers in front, and then you've got like the one pawn or the knight right behind it. At any rate, Magnus's king here is very safe with all these pawns around it, and now Kramnik plays the move queen b6. After queen b6, we get the trade of the queens, and now Magnus goes rook b8. And surely at this point, now Magnus is consolidated. He's in an endgame with an extra bishop. Kramnik will resign here because he's just down a bishop. He's down on clock. What to do? But Kramnik still is having none of it, and he plays the move rook to a6. And now Magnus plays rook to d6. And finally, Vladimir Kramnik, the former world chess champion, resigns in this position against Magnus Carlsen. Now, Magnus at this point in the tournament, he's rated 3364, but with this win, his rating keeps inching up. He actually finished the tournament on a whopping score of 9.5 out of 10 points, but in a similar fashion to something that happened in the World Rapid Blitz Championship, Magnus actually missed a round. So Magnus had a 0 from a game that he did not play. So he finished the tournament on a score of 9.5 out of 11. He was pipped by none other than Maxime Vachier-Lagrave from France, who also scored 9.5 points out of 11 and would win the tournament on tiebreak. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. So this was a fun game that I thought I would cover from the early Title Tuesday played today on January 2nd, 2024. In case I didn't mention already, hope you guys enjoyed Christmas. Hope you guys had a happy new year. And if you've not subscribed to the channel already, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we will be back soon with some more great YouTube only content. See you guys. Bye.